Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
May I call Sandra McBride, please?
Yeah.
Repeat after me. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Okay, you can sit
Thanks.
down.
Thank you very much. As you know, Mrs. McBride, my name is Jason Beer and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you tell us your full name, please?
Sandra Louise McBride.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming to give evidence to the inquiry today and for previously providing us with a witness statement. We're very grateful to you for the assistance that you provided to our investigation. Can we start with your witness statement, please?
Sure.
If you can open up the folder in front of you, you should find a witness statement in your name dated the 12th of December 2022, 15 pages in length, and at the end of it should be a signature. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
And are the contents of that witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you very much. A copy of your witness statement will be uploaded to the inquiry's website and thereby publicly available. So I'm not going to ask you questions about every part of it. Do you understand?
Okay, sure.
Can we start, please, with your background and experience? I think you joined the post office in 1986.
That's
Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
And you left in 2016.
That's
so
right.
had a 30-year career in the post office. Is that right?
Yes.
I think you started as a counter clerk. Is that right?
Yes.
Then in 1993, you moved to the training team as a sub postmaster trainer. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And was that training provided in branch to sub postmasters rather than classroom training?
It was. Yes.
And that wasn't about the Horizon system because at that time it didn't exist and hadn't been rolled out. Is that right?
Yes.
And at that stage, were you trained to be a trainer before you became a trainer? Or did you just get appointed as a trainer because of the experience you'd had as a counter clerk?
Yeah, it's because of my experience really as a counter clerk, and I did do a small amount of training in the local area. I think in the same year, 93, there was a change to Royal Mail services, and I trained some sub postmasters on the new services, the new system.
In 1997, you moved to become what you describe in your statement as a CM2 manager. What's a CM2 manager?
Counter manager level 2, I think it was stood for.
Okay. And your statement also describes yourself as a transactional knowledge manager.
Mm-hmm.
What was a transactional knowledge manager?
Right, so there was a few of us around the country, and our role was to deliver sessions for sub postmasters, mostly in the evenings, and we had a load of laptop computers which we took with us, and the sub postmasters completed a transactional knowledge quiz on these computers. So that was we did that also at Crown offices as well, but mostly sub postmasters.
And so the Crown offices, I think you said in your statement, were during the day.
That's right, yeah.
The SPMs were in the evenings.
That's right, yeah.
And although you were using computers in order to train and to, I think, administer the quiz, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
That wasn't training on Horizon because similarly at that stage, Horizon hadn't been rolled out.
That's right, yeah.
That role was, I think, eventually dissolved and you went into the classroom to deliver new entrant training. Is
That's
that right?
right, yeah.
And I think when you delivered that classroom training, is that right? You did use Horizon.
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, whether, because I can't remember exactly when it went into the classrooms, but initially in 97 it would have just been the manual classroom training.
Yes. If you just look at your statement,
Yeah.
please, and look at the second page, and the paragraph number 2. you say, as far as I recall, I used a Horizon. I used a training Horizon system, not live, during occasional classroom training I delivered prior to my maternity leave in May 2000. So I think that's the period we're talking about.
yeah.
Is that right there?
Without knowing exactly the dates that when the Horizon was put into the CTOs, I can't recall whether that was with Horizon or without, to be honest.
And you're referring to CTOs there. Can you explain what a CTO is?
Yeah, a CTO stands for Counter Training Office. It's where the classroom-based training took place.
And where was that for you?
For me, that could have been at lots of different places.
What was your geographical area?
So I was based in Colchester. We did have a CTO at Colchester at one point, but I think that was quite early days. But I would work in Bury St Edmunds, Ilford, wherever I was asked to go, really.
So in the East Anglia area, moving into
Yeah.
East London?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so that's right, is it, that first part of the sentence in paragraph 2? Before you went on maternity leave, you did use a Horizon training system in the classroom, but you can't remember how far back before May 2000 that was.
No.
Before you delivered training on Horizon, using Horizon, were you yourself trained in Horizon?
I remember having the 2 days training that everybody got.
Okay,
You know, like I think managers got 2 days and clerks got 1 day, if I remember rightly.
and you say that in, I think, in paragraph 6 of your witness statement, if we go over the page. You say, I've been asked how much experience I had using the Horizon IT system prior to training others on how to use it. As far as I recall, I received a standard 2 days Horizon training, which I believe was delivered by external trainers. Is that right? So you got the same training as everyone else, no special training because you were going to be a trainer?
Not that I recall. I remember having the 2 days, but to deliver the classroom training, I must have had some kind of training on the system that was in the classroom, because that was slightly different
Slightly different to
the live environment.
Can you remember the differences between it and the live environment?
I remember initially we weren't initially with Horizon. We had standalone units in the classroom. So, for example, if there was 6 positions in the classroom, each counter as such had its own unit. So they weren't linked like they would be in a branch.
We're going to come to some of the detail in this
Oh, okay.
Later, but
Yeah.
that's one difference. So if there were multiple counters in a live environment, that wasn't replicated in
No, that's right.
in the classroom.
No, that's right.
Can you remember now any other differences between the classroom system, the standalone terminals, and out in the field?
Some of the transactions, I think I mentioned in my statement as well, we couldn't do on the training system. For example, at a later date, we couldn't do pensions, cash pensions through the system. We had to go into training mode as a workaround. That's information is from the document, so I didn't really remember that, but that triggered that memory from the documents you sent to me.
Yes.
So where there was a third party involved, as in if the system had to retrieve data from elsewhere, like DVLA, then we didn't have that facility in the classroom. So we had to have what's called an emulator to emulate responses if we did those transactions. I think that was with Horizon Online rather than the original Horizon.
Okay, thank you. So far as you were aware, Was the position that you found yourself in, i.e. giving training on the basis of the standard 2 days training that everyone got, the same for other trainers too?
I can't recall. I can't recall what the other trainers
Can
received.
can you recall a training course for trainers that you didn't go on but other people did?
There may well have been, actually. There may well have been.
And why wouldn't you have gone on it?
I might have gone on it. I don't.
Okay.
Oh, I can't remember. Sorry, I don't remember.
I mean, your recollection, as you've written down in your statement there, is that you received the standard 2 days training that everyone got.
Yeah, I definitely did do that. I do remember that.
Did you ever receive any refresher training on Horizon?
Not specifically. No.
Was it ever discussed whether it might be an idea? I think you continue to work from with Horizon for 16 years, essentially, from when you returned from maternity leave, I think in November 2000 until you left the organisation in 2016, that refresher training might be a good idea.
Yes, it would have. I think we were really, as trainers, were required to keep themselves up to date with the system.
How would you keep yourself up to date with the system?
The same as anybody in the live environment, really. You'd be notified of changes and any updates that were made through the normal communication channels of updating everybody. I can't remember exactly what they were at the moment.
Okay, but so far as you remember, no dedicated refresher training.
Not that I can recall, no.
As I think we'll discover in a moment, and as you've already mentioned, at this time you were using a training version of Horizon and not the operating version that was used in the live estate. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And I think you undertook that role until May 2000. As I said already, you returned from maternity leave in November 2000, and from that time onwards you had an administrative function. Is that right?
Yes.
Would a fair description of that be having responsibility for the maintenance of the new entrant counter training materials?
That's right.
And was that a regional role or a national role?
National.
And was it, I was going to say just you, that sounds terrible. Was it you or was there anyone else doing it?
Well, I was the only person who did that role.
Right.
But I had support from the team, the wider training team.
And what support did the wider training team give you?
They would be involved in changes. So I organised a group from the teams, sort of like, so there were some trainers, some training managers and a trainer coach, which was sort of a higher level of manager. And we had regular meetings to discuss changes to the course materials. So their input helped identify changes that we needed to make, any amendments. So that's where the support was, in that their knowledge and experience of using the training materials sometimes identified improvements, and obviously then if there were any changes to products, then we would as a group make sure that the changes are made to all the materials in the course.
And did you hold the pen, as it were, over the changes to the manual or the materials?
Yes, I sort of like, as I was the custodian of them all, so I just made sure that the changes were made. Some of the changes I made myself, once somebody had identified what needed to be done. So a lot of those changes I did do after agreeing with the team, the working group that I worked with, what changes were needed.
And just to be clear as to the extent or limitations of your role, you weren't involved in the initial rollout of the Horizon training program, i.e., existing sub-postmasters and counter staff, their training on the new Horizon system.
No.
That was down to, I think, the company responsible for the design and build and rollout of the system,
Yeah.
which became Fujitsu.
Yes.
Your role was to have responsibility, secondly, for the entire suite of training materials. Is that right? For trainees on the new entrant counter training program?
Yeah, just the new entrant training, yes.
And that have obviously included an element, a significant element of training on the Horizon system.
Yes.
Now, you say in paragraph 17 of your witness statement, if we just turn to that, please, which is on page 5. In the third sentence of the fourth line, the training course changed in length and content over the years. Initially, the classroom course was only available to branch office staff, but after making changes, it was offered to sub-postmasters. But when did that change take place?
I don't recall exactly when that was.
Can you recall why the new entrant training as a classroom course was only available to branch office staff
No, I don't know why.
and only rolled out to those becoming sub-postmasters later?
Yeah, I don't know why that decision was made to change that.
I'm looking at it the other way round, why the decision was
Oh,
made not to include sub-postmasters from the outset.
I don't know because
I know it wasn't your decision,
no,
presumably.
the classroom training initially was offered to, or it was mandatory for branch office staff. That was in place when I joined in '86, actually. So that was, I don't know why that was how it was, but that was how it was when I joined.
You say, picking up on what you've just said, if we go over the page to paragraph 21, new entrant training was offered to all new sub-postmasters, although was mandatory for branch office staff. Are you drawing a distinction there between one being optional and one being mandatory?
At a later date, once the classroom training was offered to sub-postmasters, it was offered to them rather than being mandatory like it was for branch office staff.
And why was that?
I don't know, to be honest.
Can you think of a reason why a distinction was drawn?
Because I'm guessing that when a sub-postmaster takes over a post office, they've got a lot to deal with. They may not have been able to take the time out to go to the classroom training. The location of the classrooms might not have been suitable.
Why didn't those things apply to counter staff?
I think with counter staff, as far as I'm aware, they were able to book into accommodation like hotels if they were a long way from a CTO, counter training office, which that didn't apply to sub-postmasters.
So it was about accommodation for relating to attendance that.
Yeah, so they could get to a counter training office. So if it was a long way from, because we had several around the country, but obviously not everybody was able to travel perhaps on a daily basis to a counter training office. So they were put up in hotels to enable them to attend.
And that was the reason why it was only voluntary attendance for sub-postmasters?
No, I don't believe that is why it was only voluntary for sub-postmasters. I don't think they were, the business would pay for them to go to a hotel.
Other than that,
I don't know.
you don't know the
that's
reason.
my assumption, really.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think there came a time when the audit team merged with the training team.
That's right, yes.
And after that time, you had responsibility for maintaining the audit documents and tools, as well as the training documents and tools.
That's right, yes.
And again, was that a national responsibility?
Yes.
And so, if from whenever this date was, we'll establish the date in a moment if we can, somebody was to ask who's responsible for the maintenance of policy documents or protocol documents relating to audit nationally, that would be you.
Yes.
Can you remember when you assumed that position, when you took up that role?
Not exactly, no, I don't know when that...
So it's after November 2000
Yes, it would have been, yes.
and before 2016 when you left.
Yeah.
Any recollection as to in that 15 or 16 years when that might be?
From seeing a document on here that you supplied, it states that it was around about 2008.
Yes. We're going to look at that document a little later in the morning. But you've read that now. Does that jog your memory at all, or doesn't it assist with your memory
Well,
at all?
it says 2008, so I trusted it was 2008.
Okay. And what were the reasons, as you understood them, for the merger of the two teams, audit and training?
I think, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that it was to utilise the number of trainers that we had, to make the trainers multi-skilled, because the training team was quite a large team, and I think that was one of the reasons to multi-skill the field trainers.
I was going to ask you that. Were the existing teams, the teams of trainers and the teams of auditors, asked to carry out their existing roles, i.e. the trainers stayed as trainers and the auditors stayed as auditors, or after the merger did auditors carry out training and trainers carry out audits?
Yes, they did, yeah. They wanted all the advisors, as they became known, to be multi-skilled, to be able to do both.
Would it be right that sometimes a failure in training might manifest itself in the course of an audit? If somebody hadn't been properly trained about something,
Possibly, yes.
they might make mistakes,
Yes.
and those mistakes might show up in an audit.
Yeah, if they weren't perhaps following procedures, it might do. The audit was primarily to check the assets in the branch against what the Horizon system, when Horizon was in, said there was. So I suppose if somebody hadn't been trained properly in those procedures, they could make errors. The audit also included other areas such as compliance. So the auditors would check compliance as well.
Compliance with what?
Anti-money laundering and areas like that.
So regulatory compliance.
That's right, yeah.
And would it ever be the case that a person that had been trained by a training and audit advisor would then be audited by that same person?
Possibly, yes.
And is that because the pool was relatively small and geographically based?
The pool of
Training and audit advisors
that was quite a large number of people, but obviously I think when they were scheduled to attend an audit, the advisors would be allocated a branch fairly local to them, which would apply with the training aspect as well.
So it's the geographical limitation that means that you might get the same person that
That's
trained
right,
you
yeah.
as
Yeah.
a year or two later auditing you.
Yes.
You refer, we needn't turn it up in paragraph 46 of your witness statement, to trainers being trained on audit tools and shadowing auditors and vice versa. Is that because they were required to multitask?
Yes.
And was that from 2008 again?
Yes, it would have been, yes.
Can we look, please, at a document, please? Poll 3004. Now, this is going to come up on the screen for you. 3004 3806. And I mean, it's going to be so complicated to find where you are on that. This document, take it from me, describes you as the audit and training advisor.
I haven't seen anything yet.
No,
Oh.
I think it's come up on the screen now. If we go over to the next page, please.
I can't see anything on my screen at the moment.
Just wait a moment. Somebody will come out and help. Can you now see?
Yes, I can.
And in the time that that's taken, I've now lost you. Take it from me, this describes you as an audit and training advisor.
Yes, yes. I remember
Is that right?
that was the role I was at the time. Yes, that would have been my title. Yes.
So if you had to fill out a passport application and they said, what's your job title? You would have written in it, audit and training advisor.
Yes.
Who did you advise? Or is that a misdescription?
Yes, I didn't sort of advise as such.
Sorry, the document can be taken down now, particularly as it was of no use to me.
I think we were all called advisors in some format, like the field support advisors. They were the trainers stroke auditors. The role name changed my role name changed over the course of the years I did it. But I don't really call myself, don't recall being an advisor as such.
You wouldn't have seen yourself as an
Not
advisor?
Really, no.
Just like the people that were doing the training, you wouldn't have seen them as advisors?
No.
You'd have called them trainers?
Yes, yeah.
And the people doing the auditing, you would have seen them as auditors?
Yes, I think
Not
so, yes.
advisors?
No, not really.
Okay. Did you in fact give advice at all to anyone?
Not really, no, I don't think so.
Did you advise over the content of the changes to the training materials and audit materials? Or did you just administrate the changes that were made by others?
I suppose I would have had input into that, into the changes.
And what do you mean by you would have had input? Can you give us a feel for the extent of your involvement?
For example, I'm trying to think of an example.
So when Horizon Online came in, say in 2010, there would have needed to be a change to the training manuals, materials.
Yes.
Would you have sent a memo out to trainers or manager trainers and said, this thing is coming in, we need some content, please suggest the content? They send it in, you collate it. Or would you have said, no, I don't think that's a very helpful suggestion to a change to the materials. I think it would be better worded like this.
Yes, I suppose I did have in that sort of input, like, you know, I would perhaps make sure that it was any training material, as in trainer notes, that they would have to refer to if they were running a course, for example, was legible and easy to understand for the person delivering it, and that it was grammatically correct and that sort of thing. So that's my sort of that sort of thing, really.
So that makes it sound as if your role was still relatively administrative.
Yes.
Making sure that things were grammatically correct and made sense, rather than making changes to or suggesting changes to issues of substance.
Yes. Yeah, and I was responsible for making sure version control was kept up to date, to make sure things were, and communicated to the team. So when changes were made, I would, you know, make sure that everyone was aware of those changes.
Can we look, please, at poll 308 5658? This is a set of slides that you, I think, refer to in your witness statement, because the inquiry had showed them to you. That's paragraph 53 of your witness statement, and we could see that this is a set of slides headed 28th of September 2011, audit review cascade, and on the first page there's mention of Sue Richardson, the project and standards manager, and on the second page of the slides, under the heading background, it says early 2008 the network support field team, NSFT, took over responsibility for financial and compliance auditing from the national audit team. Is that the document you were referring to earlier when you referred to the date being 2008?
Yes.
It refers to that team taking over responsibility for financial and compliance auditing. Was there any other kind of auditing?
No, not that I recall.
And so they took over all auditing?
Financial audits.
Yes.
And the compliance. Yes.
And if we just go forwards to page 10 of this document, please. Chapter 2 of the slides appears to refer to you and Mr. Paul Humber giving the presentation.
Yes.
And who was Paul Humber?
Paul Humber was a field support advisor. He was originally in the audit team prior to joining with the training team, and he was a very knowledgeable and experienced auditor.
And you probably don't remember delivering this session, but looking at the slide, it suggests you maybe delivered it together with him.
Yes, that suggests.
Is that a fair inference?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
And if we look over the page, please, to page 11, can you help us as to what this is describing or doing, what's being presented here?
So I think this is displaying is that the person named on the left would be the person who has suggested an update. The request as it is detailed, what they're suggesting, and what we've done about it, and what the benefit of that suggestion or change was.
I see. And so you were essentially running through suggestions to changes, the response to them, and the believed outcome of them.
Yes, yeah. So the review, I think, was I think what we did, or what Sue asked for. We would get feedback from the team, and I think perhaps stakeholders as well involved. I don't know if it was this document or a different one. And because I looked after chapter 2 with Paul, that's why me and Paul were delivering this section, and these are the changes that were suggested for this particular section.
And this is all about audit rather than training.
This is
that
audit, yes. And yeah, so these are the feedback that we would have received, and that's what, that details what we did.
This, in the course of the suggestions and the responses, there's reference to debts in branch accounts being shown up on audit. What experience at this time did you have of debts or discrepancies showing up in branch accounts?
Not much, to be honest.
That was the purpose of an audit, amongst other things.
Yes, yeah, to identify,
To identify a discrepancy.
Discrepancies, yes.
By this time, so September 2011, how frequently, do you remember I got the date September 2011 from the front slide?
Yes, yeah.
How frequently, to your knowledge, were debts or discrepancies shown up in audits?
I don't know. I wouldn't know the data. I don't know how frequently that would happen.
Were the causes of such debts or discrepancies ever fed back to you?
No.
Did anyone mention that by this time, September 2011, that Horizon itself might be causing debts or discrepancies to be shown?
No, not at all.
That the system itself was responsible for creating falsely shortfalls?
No.
In your career, we'll look at this in more detail in a moment, right up until 2016, had you ever heard of such a suggestion?
No.
Overall, how did you regard the robustness and reliability of the data produced by Horizon from, say, November 2000 until you left the organisation in 2016?
I trusted it, I suppose. It's we worked with the system that we expected to be right, and we trusted the information that it produced.
And why did you trust it?
I don't know, really. I suppose it's because we I was going to say trust again. I don't know why I trusted it, because we hadn't any other reason not to, I suppose.
Did you assume that it had been through some process of procurement and testing and validation,
Yes.
for example?
Yeah.
That you assumed that the post office wouldn't roll out a system that was riddled with errors.
That's right, yeah.
And to your knowledge, was that trust in the system ever called into question?
No, not from what I recall.
Did anyone mention that the system had bugs, errors and defects in it?
No.
that were liable to produce false data.
No.
Now, you've already told us, that document can come down, thank you, that the training machines used for training on Horizon were not live, in inverted commas, so were therefore different to those used out in the field. That's right.
Yes.
Do you know why that was? That the machines used to train people were, in that respect, different from those that they would then use when they got out into the field?
I think it's so that there could be no danger of any transactions that were conducted in the training going into the live state, if you like. I don't know for sure.
Do you know whether any consideration was given to partitioning the training system so that that couldn't happen?
No.
Still having it live, but partitioning it so that the data couldn't affect the actual operations on the ground.
When we had Horizon Online, I believe that we did have certain things, so that like certain screens were as was seen in a live environment, but so we received it to us, but the data couldn't go the other way, so the transactions couldn't be added to the live estate data, if you like.
We'll look at that in a little more detail when we look at some documents later, the process after 2010 with Horizon Online. But before then, can you recall whether any measures were taken in the training that explained to trainees that their appreciation of problems on the system might be different when they are out in the field?
I think we would the trainers would say it would be different in the field because the amount of transactions and stock and cash that we held within the classroom environment was very small. So when they got to their branch, they're more likely to have had a lot more of everything. So there's those differences. As I said to you about the the emulator, we had an emulator to emulate responses that for certain transactions, and then also I mentioned about the pensions. Obviously, that we had to do a workaround in the classroom to enable the pensions to be trained. So that was obviously different to what it would have been in the live environment for the trainees.
Let's look at some materials. Can we look at FUJ 401703? And just to familiarise ourselves with the date and the nature of the document, this is described as a counter-training officer's strategy. You'll see that it's a Fujitsu services document, and you'll see that it's dated the 27th of November 2002. You'll see that the distribution of it includes the post office and, amongst others, Sandra Lewis. Was that you?
Yes.
Your maiden name?
Yes.
And if we go to page 9, please, and look at the hardware section under 3.2.1, you'll see that this records that each CTO is equipped with freestanding Horizon training systems. A summary of the hardware is listed below, and you'll see what it is. and then under the bullet points, each training system is a standalone counter. 2 of the counters will be connected to the Epson 200 inkjet printers. There is no connection to any other counter or server, and all the counters are identical in every way. And so this is a reflection of the point that I think you were making earlier, or the evidence that you gave earlier, that this would differ from any branch in which multiple counters were used out in the field.
Yes.
And do you know why that was?
No.
So if there was a particular problem with multiple counter operation out in the field, if there was a bug or an error or a defect in the system that particularly arose when multiple counters were operated together, that wouldn't be apparent in the training setup.
No.
And so that couldn't be trained on, and more importantly perhaps, it wouldn't manifest itself to the trainers.
No.
Then if we look at 3.2.2, please. The systems are built as standard training counters of the type and software level used for delivering classroom training to outlet managers and their staff during the national rollout of Horizon. At the time of installation, the systems mirrored the functionality of the systems being installed in live offices at the start of national rollout. This release was known as CSR. Since then, an upgrade has been performed at release CSR Plus at a level known as CI4. The systems also reflect the functionality described in training workbooks issued on training courses during the national rollout. The training counter also features facilities to run and reset Polo. Can you remember what that was?
No.
And to reset training data. Note that unlike training mode, the training data is not reset automatically at power up or power down or at logout. The CTO counter build currently contains both the standard UK training build and Northern Ireland variant. The trainer is able to select which variant to load up and run. This build will also support use of the OKI 8P Plus printer as well as the Epson Stylus 200. The systems feature the same set of training data used by Pathway in training mode and the delivery of training for the rollout program, both at CSR and CSR Plus. When the CTO systems were refreshed to reflect the functionality being introduced at CSR Plus, additional data was included, allowing trainers to set exercises which use some of Post Office Limited's own training aids, i.e. barcoded bills and barcoded order books. This is all detailed in another document. And then, can you help us then with that in mind? From your knowledge, to what extent did the software in use in the training setup differ from that in the live environment?
I don't know the specifics, to be honest. I believe from reading another document that we had updates via discs. Therefore, the training offices weren't updated as quickly, I think, as the live environment. I can't remember how the live environment was updated, but I know from reading a document that you've shown me that we received discs in the CTOs to update them. So there was a time lag. I think so, yeah.
But can you remember whether the aim was to replicate from a software perspective everything in the live estate, in the training setup? Or whether in fact there were differences?
I can't remember whether there were, what the differences were, if there were differences.
Can you remember a part of the system called Riposte?
Vaguely, yes.
can you help us? If there were, as we now know that there are, errors, bugs and defects in the riposte message servers operating in the field, in the live environment, would that be, would you expect that also to be apparent in the training units?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would expect so.
Can you ever recall that being mentioned as an issue, that the message servers used by riposte had defects within them
No.
about what information they were communicating?
Oh, I don't think so. No.
Can we just fast forward a moment to 2016, please, and see by the time you left what the position was then? Can we go to poll 303 5737? Can you see that this is a document, a post office document, headed Counter Training Office, POS, Training Systems Requirements? It's dated the 15th of February 2016, and you can see that you're listed as one of the reviewers, so I think this must be pre your leaving.
Yes.
Do you remember this document at all?
Not before seeing it.
More recently?
No, that's right.
And now you've seen it more recently, can you tell us what the purpose of the document was?
I think, well, as it says, it's stating our requirements, the post office requirements for the training system.
And so who was it issued to?
Fujitsu, I'm guessing.
And if we look at page 4 of the document, please. Just familiarising ourselves with the background. Post Office undertaking a major transformation of its IT systems, hardware and networks. This is known as the Branch Technology Transformation Programme. Does that ring a bell now?
Yes, vaguely, not.
Okay,
so
a
well,
barely
to be
audible
honest.
bell. The replacement of the existing post office, the existing point of service system, Horizon Online, used in all post office branches, British Forces branches, some admin locations and counter training offices, is part of the Branch Technology Transformation Programme and is known as the Front Office Application FOA Programme. The CTOs, counter training offices, are used to train all new postmasters, WH Smith colleagues and post office branch colleagues. Each counter training office classroom is a live branch on Horizon Online using live reference data. But all transactions processed are clearly differentiated so that training transactions are stored separately from the live transactions. That's what I referred to earlier as partitioning.
Right, okay.
Can you remember that by this time, by 2016, the position was that in the classroom, in the CTOs, each classroom was a live branch using Horizon Online and use live reference data?
Yes, with Horizon Online, yes.
And can you remember when that change took place? That in the classroom, live reference data was used for training?
No, I don't remember exactly when that was.
Was it timed at the same time as the introduction of Horizon Online? Or did it come in after the introduction of Horizon Online?
I don't remember.
Do you know why the change was made, that live data was used, live reference data was used?
No.
And can you therefore not help us as to what prevented that from happening whilst you were responsible for the national training documents before then?
No, I don't know.
Did anyone ever explore this? Why can't we do in the classroom the things that we're going to expect these
Yeah, we would.
thousands of sub-postmasters
Yes,
to do out in the
exactly.
field?
Yes, yeah.
Train them in the same, using the same data that they're likely to encounter when they get out there.
I remember we would, and I can't remember exactly when it was though. We would often have feedback, if you like, from, well, not just for, from myself as well, that we should be training the same as what the live environment we're seeing.
When you say we would, sorry, this document can come down, thank you. When you said we would often have feedback,
Yeah, so trainers, and it was just something that it was a we weren't able to always show exactly what was in the live environment, and we would express that, but I don't know why. I don't know what the reasoning was as to why we couldn't always have that.
was this a constant sort of niggle or concern?
I think in the early days of Horizon it was because of, but once we got Horizon Online, obviously the screens that we could see were the same. So and the processes, were the same as well, but we weren't able to do all transactions, if I recall. It's hard to remember on the training system.
Can you remember when these concerns or issues were raised, what the answer was that came back as to why we can't do it? We want to train all of these sub-postmasters using a system that's the same as the one out in the field, using data that's likely to be the same as the data that they will be processing out in the field. You can't do that because, and what was the because?
I don't think there was a definitive answer that I can recall. I have a feeling it may well have been around budgets, possibly, because I don't know for sure, but that might have been an obstacle, that if we had to, or the post office had to pay, or the training team, whoever, had to pay for an upgrade. I think with the earlier days that might have been an issue, and that might have been a barrier to getting, a more up-to-date system for training.
Was it ever reported back to you that the system as operated in the classroom manifested bugs, errors and defects?
No.
Can we turn to updates to the training equipment and software? And in paragraph 32 of your witness statement, if we just turn that up, please. (32), which is on page 8. You say, I can recall that the training horizon systems in the CTOs were not always up to date, so trainers had to talk through some transactions that could not be completed on the training horizon system. When we first received the training horizon systems, I don't recall us having input into what was on the systems. So dealing with the first part of that first, the systems in the classroom not always being up to date, and so trainers had to talk through some transactions without being able to demonstrate them or tutees being able to conduct them. Is that right?
On the Horizon system, yeah. We could explain how to do a transaction physically, but not necessarily on the screen.
Was that because of the system not being live? Is this a function of or a consequence of the system not being live?
Possibly, or that it was when we had the discs to update. I can't remember exactly. And also, as I mentioned previously, with the emulator, or that would emulate responses. But with the pensions instance, that's the main one really that comes to mind from looking at the documents. So I can't remember exactly which transactions that we couldn't do, but I know there were some that they couldn't physically do on the system. But I think the thought was that it wasn't a major issue because the trainer could talk through it, and the person would then receive on-site training in their branch, so therefore they would see the transaction live.
The emulator, was that connected to anything outside of the room?
I don't know.
Was it? We know that the way that Horizon operated is that there were connections to servers held in other parts of the country,
Right.
up in Bootle, for example. And one of the issues that we've been exploring is errors, bugs, and defects in the local servers' communication with sending messages to and from the servers up in Bootle.
Right.
Can you recall whether the emulator was connected to anything in that way?
I don't think so. I don't think it was. I don't know.
And so the system was sort of standalone in the classroom.
I can't remember how it worked, to be honest. I think it was just in the classroom, I think.
What did it emulate?
Responses from DVLA. So if you scan a barcode of E11, it would emulate a response that you would receive in the live environment from DVLA. Same for banking, chip and pin transactions.
Any other examples, please?
I can't remember.
So was it supposed to emulate third party, as you call
Yeah,
them, transactions?
Yeah. I can't remember any others.
Was it part of the training to do balancing?
Yes.
Did the emulator have any role in balancing?
No.
Can we go, please, back to Fujitsu 401703? Remember, we looked at this a moment ago. And can we go to page 12, please? And under the heading upgrading the software level at number 5, the first paragraph, the document, remembering this is late 2012, the systems will receive software upgrades as planned and agree between Pathway and Post Office Limited. I think that's meant to read and agreed between Post Office and Pathway. Because of the standalone nature of the systems, it is not possible to keep them up to date with the reference data changes which are regularly sent to the networked systems installed in the live post office outlets. Each counter is fitted with a removable hard disk. This enables replacement disks to be easily swapped in and out on site for the purpose of upgrading the systems to a newer release when required. Is that what you were referring to earlier about updates not being automatic, but there being a lag?
Yes.
And then if we go over to page 13, please. And scroll down, please. And 3 paragraphs on the bottom there. The document provides, for clarification, there is no support in the training counter for PIN pads, debit card method of payment, or NBS, network banking services, since these features are not supported in training mode. Support for these features would require additional development and testing effort and would need to be requested separately. That reflects the fact, doesn't it, that there were differences, perhaps significant differences, between the training machines operated as compared to a live operating environment. Is that right?
Yes.
Would you agree that one benefit of having the live reference data and essentially a live system operating in the CTOs would have been that if there were errors, bugs and defects in the operation of Horizon, they would have manifested themselves to the trainers?
Yes.
The same trainers who are going to be the auditors?
Yes. Before 2008.
Yes.
Or after 2008 rather, yeah.
Well, both before and after 2008.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
I'm sorry, Mrs. McBride, you dropped your voice in that last exchange. Could you just say what you told Mr. Beer, please?
I was just saying, initially I said before 2008, and then I said after.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Beer did say both before as well, and I said yes, that's right.
Fine. Yeah, thank you.
Now, you were involved in training, as we've discussed, and had responsibility for the training materials from when you returned from maternity leave in November 2000 until you took redundancy some 16 years later.
Yes.
One of the things that good training is supposed to prepare trainees for is, would you agree, when things go wrong with the systems that they're using?
Yes.
And one of the things that good training is supposed to prepare for is that where there are known problems or difficulties in the operation of a system or in the operation of the processes that the trainees are going to be going to be required to use, good training informs them of such problems in advance.
Yes. Yeah.
It shouldn't be facing the training just towards a rosy world where everything is perfect. It should be looking at a world where things perhaps go wrong.
Yes.
And in that 16-year period that we're talking about, were you ever told directly of any problems that arose with the riposte messaging system?
No.
Did you ever hear any discussion, even overhear discussion amongst others, about problems with the riposte messaging system?
No.
Were you ever told directly of any problems with Horizon's EPOS system?
No.
Did you hear about any problems concerning the Horizon EPOS system?
No.
Were you ever asked by anyone else within Post Office to address problems in the field in the training materials?
No.
No?
No, not that I recall.
We heard evidence last week from Chris Gilding. Did you know Mr. Gilding?
Yes, I did.
He said that he found that sub-postmasters and counter-clerks, other people using Horizon, could make mistakes when they were using Horizon, including mistakes that would affect accounting and balancing.
Yes.
Were you aware that that could happen out in the field?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that some of the training documents for which you were responsible similarly appear to acknowledge that mistakes may need to be corrected by sub-postmasters. Is that right?
Yes.
If we can look at one of them, please. Poll 303 5624. Thank you. Can you help us as to what this document is?
I believe this is a like a training brief for the trainer. That's their script, if you like.
So notes addressed to a trainer to
Yes.
tell them how to train,
Yes. How to deliver the
training,
yeah.
or this element of the training.
Yes.
And if we can go forwards, please, to page 6 of the document and look at the foot of the page, ramming in stock. Can you now remember what ramming in and ramming out were?
Yes.
Just describe for us, please.
So it's a way of I say remming in adding stock and cash into the branch, and if you have excess stock or cash, then it's a way of getting it out of the branch.
And here we're dealing with ramming in stock, and the instructions to trainer are to accept stock to a branch. The individual pieces of stock will be entered manually once they've been checked in the classroom setting. This is identical to the branch, other than the scanning of the pouch barcode during the delivery stage. Taught the learners, that means the people being trained, yes?
It's
Through the path to the stock REM screen. And then some instructions are given. Are they keystrokes, F14
Yes,
and F2?
yeah.
At this point, remind the learners that the quantity button needs to be used to stop errors in volume. If you rem in one book of 12 first-class stamps instead of 50, you will have a gain that will result in a future transaction correction, and this mistake could mask losses that would have to be made good when the transaction correction was received. Can you explain what these instructions are telling the trainer about?
So basically, I think this area is around the example of the first class book of stamps. They came in packs of 50. So if the learner had put in one book of stamps instead of 50, that would create a gain in their balance. But that wouldn't necessarily show up as just that amount at the end of the balancing period, because there may have been other errors made during that period.
And this was masking them.
Which would, so you may well have created an error which would cause a loss, in which case that gain would not show fully necessarily.
And presumably this is an example,
Yes.
and there were many others
Yes,
like this.
absolutely, yes, yeah.
To what extent was there knowledge within the training community that unintentional errors by users out in the field could lead to accounting discrepancies, including imbalances?
Yeah, I think that was
Widespread.
Widespread, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And to what extent was that known by the auditors, that a simple error of the type described here in the operation of Horizon, this isn't about a bug error or defect,
No.
this is in the simple operation of Horizon, could create imbalances like this unintentionally?
I would expect that to be the same as well.
To equally known amongst trainers and auditors?
Yeah.
And that just because a loss is shown doesn't necessarily mean a dishonest
No.
appropriation by a sub-postmaster?
No, absolutely.
Would that be your first thought if there was an imbalance? It must be the sub-postmaster that's taken the money.
No,
Why not?
because they might have just entered a figure in incorrectly into the system. They might have miscounted their cash and then put the incorrect figure in, or stock in the same way.
And how many of these, I mean, this is quite a neat example here that we're looking at on the screen. How many of these types of issue were there?
Or with the example,
Yes.
I don't know for sure, but I would imagine it's human error to perhaps, to, especially in that instance where something comes in as a block and you count it as one and actually it's 50. So that, that would possibly happen initially until, maybe, make a mistake once and then you learn obviously from it, don't you? But I would imagine that happened quite frequently.
And were there any prompts in the system, for example, on this, where you could see that it's an error easily made, that came up on Horizon, which said, check that you in fact mean one book of first-class stamps rather than 50?
I can't remember. I don't think so, but I can't remember for sure.
i.e. the system recognising the likelihood or possibility of unintentional error and prompting the user to say, stop, think, do you really mean that?
I don't recall.
You don't recall any?
No, I don't. I not familiar. No, I can't remember what the system showed.
Did the system communicate back to the user in that way? Sort of user messages?
I can't recall.
In any event, this kind of error, you would expect knowledge of it to be the same in the auditing community as in the training community.
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Certainly after merger, because they're the same people.
Yeah.
So it's just coming up to 20 past 11. I wonder whether we might take the morning break. Thank you very much. Should we? Can we say 35 past?
Yep, certainly.
Thank you very much, sir. So, good morning. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. McBride, can we turn to the issue of on-site training and balancing in particular? The inquiry has heard some evidence and will, in the coming months, hear some more evidence about training on balancing being supplemented by on-site training in the field. Did you have any involvement in the provision of that training or assistance?
No.
It was carried out by people described at one stage certainly as field support advisors.
Yes.
Were they within your area of responsibility?
On a couple of occasions, I did manage some field advisors or trainers during that time.
Can we look at a document that might assist us here? Poll 303 4108. can you see that the title of the document, Information for Field Sorted Support Advisors on Post Office Local Branches, and then at the foot of the page you can barely see it, it's dated December 2012.
Yes.
Is this a document within the suite of documents for which you were responsible?
Yes.
It is, okay. And then if we look at the second page, Introduction to Post Office Local. This document will evolve as the project progresses. Can you help us with what the project Post Office Local was?
That's when branches were open for longer hours. So they would be in a shop, for example, that opened at 7 in the morning until possibly 10 o'clock at night, and post office services would be available during that time. Not just the core hours from 9 till 5:30. They would be able to provide certain post office services after that time or before.
Can we go forwards, please, to page 7? And look in the middle of the page, please. Under the 3 bullet points, the FSA, the Field Support Advisor, will be on site for normal core hours, approximately 8:30 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday, and Saturday morning until 12:30. A follow-up balance will be added at the end of the on-site support, and although Post Office Local branches can do their BTS, can you remember what BTS was?
Oh no, I don't remember what that is. I should know, but I can't remember. Sorry.
No, you're 6 years out of the job, and this is a decade ago. At any time of the appropriate day, under BAU,
Business as usual.
for the follow-up balance, one FSA Field Service Advisor will attend to support from 1600.
Oh, I've remembered what BTS is now. Branch Trading Statement.
Thank you. And can you tell us what this is referring to, this follow-up balance?
So that's a assistance at the next balance that the branch would be doing once the trainer had left. So a follow-up is like once the trainer's left on a certain day, and then the next balance that the branch would be required to do, then the trainer would be there to support them on that.
And what was the need or purpose of this?
It's just to support the branch further with their balancing.
Can you remember any court reports coming back as a result of this, that there were problems with these, with balancing?
Not that I recall.
And then if we go forwards, please, to page 12. Under the heading Balancing and Trading Periods, the document says it's at the operator's discretion whether they complete an office balance on a Wednesday for a balance period between trading periods. The branch has to complete a trading statement on the Wednesday that their trading group is scheduled to end their trading period. This should be done at a quiet time, etc. Can you help us? What led to this additional support or training out in the field being thought to be necessary?
No, I think prior to this training, we would always give support after the branch has been on, the postmaster's been on their own for a few days. So we would do on-site support training, and then leave them on their own, and then support them at the balance, because the balance was a, I say complicated thing, but it could be, complicated, I suppose. So the support was needed. It was thought that the support was needed in the balancing area.
I mean, putting it bluntly, was this introduced because there had been problems with balancing?
Yeah, possibly. But I think the idea was that it wouldn't really be right to let someone just once a trainer had gone, just be out on their own without any support. So the balance was the area that it was felt that they needed the support in.
And you've referred to it as being, or it could be complicated, the balancing exercise.
Could be, for some people found it a bit confusing, I think.
And it was crunch time, in the sense that it's when all of the work of the previous trading period came together.
Yes.
Were, to your knowledge, any additional staff recruited for this purpose? Or was this a function carried out by the existing training and auditors?
It was carried out by the existing pool of trainers and, FSAs, as they were known.
Can we turn back then, please, to poll 303-2429. To an earlier upgrade to Horizon before it went on, became Horizon Online. You'll see this is a note about the upgrade of Horizon in December 2002. And if we go over the page, please, and look at the foot of the page, we can see that it's authored by you. And you're at this stage described as a training or the training manager.
Yeah.
Did that accurately describe your job as at December 2002?
Yes. That was my role name at the time. I didn't deliver training in that respect.
Did you manage those that delivered training?
I possibly did at that point.
And what did you do to manage them?
That required having one-to-ones with the team, cascading any changes to them in team meetings, and seeing them on site periodically while they're training in, or classroom if they were doing classroom training.
Did you have responsibility for documents that regulated when and in what circumstances a reference would be made to an investigation team?
No.
Can you recall what, if there was a tipping point for reference of a sub-postmaster off to an investigation?
No.
Did you ever have cause to refer a sub-postmaster for investigation yourself?
No.
Can you recall whether any of the trainers for which you were responsible had cause to refer people for investigation?
No.
You can't recall, or that didn't happen?
As far as I'm aware, that didn't happen.
And what about when they were auditing branches?
I didn't manage a team when they were auditors as well as trainers. They were just trainers when I was managing.
And so by that time, if it was 2008, by that time your responsibility had turned more to the administrative side.
Yes.
For maintenance of the suite of documents.
Yes.
Were you aware of people being sent for investigation?
No.
At that time?
No. Investigation in Can
Well,
you
an
explain a
au-
bit more?
Yes, an audit had shown a discrepancy, and it was believed that the sub-postmaster, member of counter staff, were responsible for the discrepancy, and it therefore required to be investigated.
Right.
So that they might be suspended, or
Right. Okay.
their branch closed, or they might be civil proceedings against them, or they might be prosecuted for a
Yeah.
crime.
Okay. I was aware that that there were discrepancies found at audits. I don't know the details, but I was aware that that was something that happened.
And were you aware of the follow-on from that? That when a discrepancy was found, what happened?
Not the full process, but yes, I was aware that they would be suspended over, if there's a certain amount, I think, that was found to be short, for example.
Were the documents that regulated when somebody was suspended, when their branch was closed, when they might be investigated by investigations division or prosecuted, were those documents within the suite of documents that you were responsible for?
The tool that the auditors used to identify a discrepancy was, yes.
What do you mean by the tool that was used?
The tool was known as a P32, which was its previous paper number, and it was pretty much like a big calculator, really, that the auditors used to enter all the details in from Horizon to get a figure, if you like, a outstanding figure, a balance or not.
And what involvement, to your knowledge, was there of any branch managers or area managers in decision making over investigation or prosecution of sub-postmasters?
I think the contracts advisors were involved in making a decision. That's based on what when I was looking at the hearing from Friday, that Chris was explaining that, and I thought, that did remind me that was the process. I think if a certain discrepancy was found, then the contracts advisor would be contacted.
And from your memory, rather than watching Mr. Gilding, can you recall whether that was a consistent feature in the process?
I don't know the results of all the audits, so I don't know for sure.
No, I meant the involvement of a contracts advisor in the decision-making process.
Yes, that would.
That was a regular feature, so far as you're aware.
Yes, yeah.
Going back to this document, please, back to page 1. Thank you. The first line says the new training system is the same as the live system on the counter up until the middle of October 2002. Can you recall whether this upgrade that you're speaking to in this document meant that from that date, the middle of October 2002, one which meant that the training system could operate as part of the live estate?
Sorry, can you say
Yes.
that again?
You remember we discussed earlier whether the standalones in the classroom operated as part of the in the same way and as part of the live estate. You said not. I took you to a document that suggested that by 2016 they certainly did. And you said at some point there was that change. You couldn't remember when.
No.
I was asking you now, looking at this document, is that first sentence a reflection of the fact that the upgrade allowed the training system to operate as a live part of the system?
Yes. Well, that's what it says, that it's the same as the live system. So I would assume then that the system would have been, as it says there, would have been the same then up until October of that year.
Well, I mean, it doesn't say that the training system was operating as a live part of the system. It says in the first sentence that it is the same as the live system
Yes.
you see.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to work out it with your assistance exactly what it does mean. Can you help us?
I don't really, I can't really remember, to be honest.
Put shortly, after this time, did the training units continue to be disconnected from the network, continuing to use an emulator?
Yes.
And so we're in the same position that any bugs, errors or defects that were manifesting themselves in the system, in the live estate, wouldn't be replicated in the offline standalone systems in the classroom.
No.
If we scroll down, please. And under barcoded bills, you refer to item 28/22H. Barcoded bill in the name of Miss I. Lonely shows on the screen as £22.50 instead of £82, which is on the bill. This can be changed manually on the screen. That appears to be a reference to a discrepancy in a barcoded bill. Yes?
Yes, although it does also highlight the fact that if somebody was only part paying a bill, that the amount could be amended on the screen manually.
What does item 28/22H refer to?
It's a barcoded bill. I don't recall what type of bill it was.
What is a barcoded bill?
So it's it could be a utility bill, which has a barcode which could be scanned.
So somebody comes in with a bill saying, I want to pay this bill.
Yes.
They present the bill to the SPM or counter clerk.
Yes.
Rather than looking at the bill and saying, right, the bill to be paid is £82 and typing in £82, they use the scanning gun, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And they scan a barcode like one does at the shops.
Yes.
Yes? And that comes up on the screen and it shows £22.50.
Yes.
Whereas it should show £82 because the bill is for £82.
That's right, yes.
But it's showing £22.50.
Yes.
Why would it show £22.50 rather than £82?
Oh, I see what you're saying. We've either communicated incorrectly and got the barcodes printed wrongly, the bills, because we used to get those printed ourselves, or we were told it was for that amount and it wasn't. I don't recall why that was different in that respect.
Is there training materials you're talking about?
Yes,
here?
yeah. This is 28/22H would have been something that we printed ourselves, but we would have had to obtain it from. Now, would we have got that? Some items we got from Fujitsu with barcode, certain barcodes on, and other things we could produce ourselves from our own, if you like, our own. It's a bit like a Blue Peter. I used to joke and say we're doing a Blue Peter job because we would be able to scan. Like I could have my own barcoded bill from home, and we would change all the details, use the barcode, but change everything else, and we could use that in the classroom if we wanted extra examples. But in this one, I can't remember whether that was one that was provided to us or whether that was one. I'm not sure where that came from originally.
Can I
As to
ask
why it was different? I don't know why it was different.
can I ask, was the intention here to train people that sometimes there can be a mismatch between what the computer shows as the sum due as a result of scanning a barcode and the actual sum due as printed on the bill? And therefore this was a training device intended to identify a mismatch between a barcoded sum and the actual sum?
I think from
Or was
what
this a genuine mistake in your training
I
materials?
think it might have been a mistake, although, as it says there, it's the way it said this can be changed manually on the screen. It's not saying this has been done on purpose so that you can explain this. So I think that would be a mistake.
In your training materials made genuinely, rather
Yeah.
than a deliberate error in order to show trainees that there can be a discrepancy between the sum produced by the machine for barcodes and the sum on a bill.
Yeah, I think it is an error.
Were you aware of problems in the live estate of barcoding producing a discrepancy between the sum generated by Horizon and the amount on the face of a bill?
No, I don't think. I haven't. I wouldn't have enough experience on the live system to know that. But I wasn't aware of that.
And this barcoded bill in the name of Miss I. Lonely, it sounds like, from the wording here, that this is a piece of training material that's rolled out widely. Is that right? Yeah. Across the country, essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
Why not change the barcode rather than, if the intention is to get the correct amount, why not alter the training materials to get the right barcode and therefore the right amount, rather than leave the wrong barcode in and require a manual change on the screen?
I think.
If this wasn't a training aid.
I think this was one that we had previously, used, and and I think the upgrade made it so that the amount was different when it was scanned, perhaps to when it was before. I can't really remember.
Well, if you go back to the first page of the document,
Yeah.
it sounds like that barcoding is a new thing.
Yes.
If you look at the first paragraph, the main differences for us are, the fourth bullet point, barcoded bills can now be scanned.
Yes. Yeah.
Sounds like this is a new.
Yes, that's right. So we used it previously, probably without having to scan the barcode, so we could do it without scanning, perhaps. But now that the bills could be scanned, this one came back. Why we didn't take it out or we couldn't get the barcode changed? I don't think we perhaps could have done. I don't know how we would have done that, but.
Just go forward a page, please, and scroll down.
But again, I think the fact that it could be changed manually, it wasn't perhaps a big risk as such to leave it in there, because it did show, as I said, it did show that you could change an amount if somebody didn't want to pay a full amount of their bill, which they could do it on some utility bills. It showed that we could change it manually on the screen.
Just go, these are the final questions I'll ask on this issue. Just go back to the first page, please, and scroll down. And just read the whole of that barcoded bills point again. Taking a step back, is this intended to tell trainers that there's a problem with our system of training and there's a manual workaround to correct it? Or is this saying there's a deliberate error, and we're using this as a training tool to show people how manually to change an amount because of a problem with barcoding in the live estate.
No, I think it was your first point.
Thank you. Can we move forward, please? That can come down from the screen to a review of the audit process in October 2011 and look at poll 308 5682. Poll 308 5682. Thank you. You'll see this document is headed Review of Post Office Limited Audit Processes and Tools of October 2011, authored again by Mrs. Richardson, and you are part of the project team listed there.
Yes.
And your job title is given as Network Change Advisor,
Yes.
as we saw. Of the people listed there, are you the most senior in
No.
the project team?
No.
Who's the most senior there?
That would be Sue.
Under project team?
Under. Oh, sorry. I think we're all the same.
So you're all the same grade?
I don't know what Shirley's grade was. So all the team leaders and the network services admin and scheduling team leader and myself are all the same grade.
And can you remember this audit, revision or review process?
Vaguely.
What can you vaguely recall? So how was it conducted?
I think from looking at the other documents that have been presented, that we obtained feedback from the team. Oh, I'm trying to think. So each team leader was responsible for a chapter of the audit process manual. And they all reviewed their own chapters, and the review, that was what the review was. They had to review their own chapters, and I think this is what that review is. The team that had taken over the audit processes were reviewing their own chapters.
Which were you responsible for? Can you remember?
Chapter 2.
So that was the slide that we saw earlier?
Yeah.
Can you recall what the need was or the requirement for review of the audit process and tools was in October 2011? What prompted it?
No, I don't know what prompted it.
Can you recall whether there was an event or was this just a cyclical thing that happened every so often?
I think maybe it was because it hadn't been done since we had taken over the audit side of things in the team, so it was deemed it was in need of happening.
I think we get a hint of that if we go over a couple of pages to page 3 of the document. Under introduction, where Mrs. Richardson says the network support field team took over responsibility for all poll financial and compliance auditing in June 2008. In January 2009, a revision was undertaken of all the audit process chapters as a basic starting point for the new ways of working using a multi-skill team of FSAs. However, the audit processes and tools remained largely unchanged until April 2010. Currently, all of the audit process chapters are reviewed against an annual rolling timetable and are the responsibility of the network services team leaders. Does that explain why this audit was being conducted in October 2011 or not?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
And so what's it essentially saying? That we took over the function in June 2008 and there hasn't been this fundamental review until now?
Yeah,
Is that what it's saying?
yeah, I think so.
And then the next subheading, the need for a review. Since the initial revision of all audit chapters in January 2009, business as usual operational changes have been made. However, a complete review has not been undertaken, and there's been no proactive identification or engagement with stakeholders to ascertain that the processes and outputs are fit for purpose and will deliver the business requirements. You remember the answers you gave a moment ago as to how the audit was, or the review of the audit was undertaken, and you said that there was feedback from individuals. Who were they?
Well, they would have been the stakeholders of the chapters, so they weren't necessarily the same stakeholders for each chapter, because each chapter obviously was a different area. So I think the team leaders were asked to contact the stakeholders and to get their feedback on the process that we were currently using for whatever chapter it was, and if it was meeting their requirements.
And when you refer to stakeholders, who are you referring to?
The people who were responsible for the area of that particular chapter. For example, somebody in compliance for the compliance chapter, there would be, they would be a stakeholder.
So if we go forwards to page 7 of the document, under stakeholders approach for feedback, under the headings directorates, do you mean the person listed against each of the names there?
Yeah. They're
Each of the directorates listed?
Yes, yeah.
And which of those was yours?
I don't think I can't remember actually, because chapter 2 was a tool rather than a process. So I think that so it was because it was a tool, it was, I suppose the team were the stakeholders, the people who used the tool.
And so under other stakeholders, network services, field support team, regional managers, team leaders, field support advisors, scheduling and admin team, and field change advisor. That's in fact you, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
They would be the people that would give you feedback to allow you to make any necessary changes to your chapter. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
You see the list of the people on the right there approached for feedback. Julia Marwood, Paul Meadows, Tracy Marshall, Susan Crichton, Paul Martin and Dawn Brooks. Can you recall whether any feedback was given by them about problems in the now 11-year operation of Horizon in the field by way of errors, bugs and defects?
No.
That's something that never occurred to you in this 16-year period at all?
No.
When I say occurred to you, was said to you in this 16-year period at all? Can we go back to the issue of balancing, please? That can come down from the screen, that document. And look at poll 303, 4184. And if we can just familiarise ourselves with the document. Do you recognise this?
Yes.
And can you tell us what it is, please?
It's what we used to call the balancing handout.
We can see at the foot of the page that it's dated April 2013, so after the audit that was just conducted. And who was it handed out by, and who was it handed out to?
It was handed out by trainers. I think we handed it out as part of the training course, as in the classroom training. But the on-site trainers would have access to copies if a new entrant, once finishing their classroom, didn't have it on site.
And were you responsible for some of the content of this document?
Yes.
Did you write it?
No.
In what way were you responsible for the content of the document?
Just making sure that if any changes were made to the procedure, that they were then updated onto the handout, and the person responsible for the handout updated it
I see. So
accordingly.
the level of responsibility you described to us right at the beginning of the session today, ensuring consistency, readability,
Yeah.
no grammatical error, that kind of
Yeah.
responsibility. If we look at page 2 of the document, please. There is some guidance on dealing with discrepancies. We can see that at the foot of the page. That last point under rollover. Just before we get there, can you tell us how the document works by reference to those grey-scaled boxes with words and numbers in them?
So they represented the buttons they pressed on Horizon.
On the screen.
Yeah, on the screen. Yeah.
So that they're essentially a printed depiction of a tile.
Yes. Yeah.
On the Horizon screen.
Yeah.
The pad.
Yes.
And in relation to roll stock units, it reads, at the end of trading period, the discrepancy settlement screen appears on the last stock to roll over into next trading period. Horizon will ask how you are going to settle the discrepancy, i.e. cash, cheque, or provide you with an option to settle the discrepancy centrally if over £150. If this option is selected, then you'll receive a statement from our accounting team in Chesterfield, which provides you with the option of paying by credit or debit card. If the discrepancy is due to a known specific error made at the branch, then contact MBSC with the details to enable further accounting investigations to be made and appropriate accounting corrections to be issued. Are you familiar with that part of the process? Were you familiar with that part of the process?
Not particularly.
What do you recall about it?
I know that what is detailed on here would have been, as far as I'm aware, was taken from the operations manuals, so the manuals that the branches were able to access to get the full procedures. I'm not really familiar with the process.
Here provision is made. We can see for where there is a known error in the branch, i.e. where the sub-postmaster knows they've made a mistake. There's no provision for where Horizon makes a mistake.
No.
Is that reflective of the fact that it wasn't believed that Horizon made mistakes?
I think so, yeah.
Were you aware of any process that enabled a sub-postmaster to challenge a balance as a result of an error that he or she believed Horizon had made?
No,
There was simply no provision for it.
not as far as I'm aware, no.
Can you remember any discussion of whether there should be such provision?
No.
Can we move forward a little still further into May 2013? That document can come down and look at poll 303 4208. And if you forgive me, I just need to catch up in the paper. If we go to the last page, so the penultimate page, page 3, can you see at the foot of the page an email exchange to which you're not copied? It's between Mr. Parsons, Andrew Parsons, to Gareth Jenkins, copied to Simon Baker on the 27th of April 2013. Gareth attaches the Horizon Online help for gyro transactions. You'll see at the top of a page, page called, and then a character string is given, that the sub-postmaster is required to, quote, select to print the office copy of the gyro daily report. This suggests that the printing of the branch copy of the daily report is not automatic as previously thought, but requires manual input from the sub-postmaster. Would you mind looking into this and confirming the position for both gyro deposits and gyro withdrawals? And then go up the page, please. And in fact, just go to the previous page at the foot so we can see who the email was from. It's a reply from Mr. Jenkins back to Mr. Parsons, copied to Mr. Baker, and then forward a page. Andy, I've just had a play on our test system. It looks like the documentation is wrong. What surprised me particularly was the fact that the post office copy is actually printed out before the gyro slips. Simon, is it worth getting James to put together a storyboard for this as he did for recovery? Also, who in poll should be updating the user guide? In particular, there is no button to just print the gyro deposits report. It is included in the counter daily report. It's this old Horizon documentation, though it clearly says Horizon Online. I did think that the slip was printed before the office report, but that could be Horizon rather than Horizon Online. And then go to the previous page. Simon Baker to Lynn Norbury. Who do I talk to update the Horizon documentation? Then up. Simon Baker again. Lynn, are you able to get back to me? So a chaser. I'd like to make sure our documentation reflects reality. Then from Simon Baker to Lynn Norbury, now copying in Craig Tuttle and Angela van den Bogert. Craig, Angela, I think Lynn might be out. Who owns the help content for the Horizon system? The investigations found some errors that I'd like to get fixed. And then over to the previous page. Lynn, at the foot of the page, thank you. Hi Simon, further to our earlier conversation, I've struggled to identify an overall owner for Horizon Online Help. I've spoken to Sandra McBride, Network Change Support Advisor, and she advises that when training identifies the need to change any documentation, she approaches the specific product manager. Just stopping there, I don't suspect for a moment that you remember this call.
No.
What are you can you explain what you're recorded as advising there? When training identifies the need to change any documentation, you approached the specific product manager.
I think I would approach the product manager if change, mainly it was when changes were coming in rather than retrospectively. But they owned the product, so they would be the experts, if you like, on their products. So if we had any clarification needed, then we would contact the product manager. And they would we also worked with them, as I said, when changes were coming in, so that we could make the changes in time for those changes when they went live, if you like, with our materials and things like that.
We saw from the email exchange, summarising it, I hope fairly, that there was Horizon legacy material still in the user guide for Horizon Online. I think that was the nature of the email exchange. Did you do anything as a result of that issue being raised with you beyond explaining who had ownership of Horizon Help?
No, not as far as I recall, no.
Whose responsibility was it to correct that kind of thing?
I suppose I don't know, whoever was responsible for Horizon Help, so I've identified it as being the product manager. Well, that's who we would contact regarding products. So whoever was responsible for the maintenance of Horizon Help, I don't know who that was. I can't remember who that was.
So your answer is who?
Although Julia says that it's the product manager.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
Lynn Norbury continues. I've also spoken to Julia Marwood. Who was she?
She might have been the head of the training team at that point. She was at one point.
And she has confirmed that each product manager is responsible for the content of their respective pages within the help menu, but that it is less black and white when it involves issues around general accounting. Within her network team, she has managers that face up the different product areas, and Stephanie Rush is responsible for engagement with the banking team, which is where this particular query lies. As to an overall owner, I will keep making inquiries. Can you add anything else to this exchange beyond what you've said already?
No.
Okay, I'll move on. In your statement, that document can come down, thank you. In your statement, you give some evidence that you have limited recall of feedback that was provided by stakeholders. Can we look at a document, please, that does record some? Poll 303 3423. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, it was part of the documents that you sent to me to review.
We can see a date of it at the foot of the page as April 2011. And we can see, I think, your name, your maiden name, as
Yes.
you are the author of it.
Yes.
And do you recall now writing it?
Yes, vaguely.
What was the purpose of it?
Well, it's reviewing the post-transfer visit, PTV, to get feedback from sub-postmasters.
So 3 months into the job, is that right?
I think it was 3 months, yes.
Why is it called a post-transfer visit?
I don't know. It was a visit that was arranged after the sub-postmaster had been in post for X amount, like 3 months. I don't know exactly why it was called that, to be honest.
What were they transferring from and to?
So it's from when they transferred in. So a transfer is when a postmaster takes over a branch.
So this whole exercise is about people who have moved branches
So it's a new. It would be a new postmaster.
as well. So they haven't
So-
moved branches, they're new into a
No,
branch.
they've not moved. So they're transferring from the old postmaster to a new postmaster.
I see.
So that's what the transfer. It was called a transfer.
And so this would incorporate old and experienced sub-postmasters who happen to have moved branches. No?
No.
Only new entrants.
New sub postmasters.
Okay.
So when they when a new postmaster went into bought a branch, a shop with a post office in, they would transfer. It was just called a transfer from the old to the new. So it's from the day they took over the branch.
Okay.
That was a transfer.
And you say in this document, following the training review, feedback was sought from new agents at the 3-month post-transfer visit. What does agents refer to there?
Postmasters.
Does it refer to any counter staff as well or not? Or is it only sub-postmasters?
No, it would be just sub postmasters.
And why are they called agents? What's the...
Again, the terminology changed over the years of what sub postmasters were referred to as. So the common one was sub postmasters, but they're also referred to as agents.
And looking at the questions asked and answered, question 1, do you feel you've had sufficient training to enable you to process all post office transactions? And only 76% said yes. Was that regarded as a low figure?
No.
And why? What was taken from that? Then was that regarded as evidence of sufficiency or success of training?
Well, there was only 88 responses, I think it says at the top there. So
Yes.
I think that was felt that was a positive figure. I don't think we had a target. It was, we weren't expecting 100% yeses or nos, but
I can understand that you wouldn't expect 100% yeses or no, but
or even
wasn't there a
responses.
target, a metric by which successful training could be measured by reference to feedback?
Not that I recall.
Question 2, which transactions do you feel most confident in dealing with? 34% of answers included AP and banking transactions, 33% included mail transactions, 24% included all transactions, 14% included daily or regular transactions, 5% included the basic transactions. And then by contrast, which do you feel least confident in dealing with and why? And you'll see the answers there. 4.5% answered balancing. And then over the page, please. To the next page. Do you feel you've had sufficient training to enable you to prepare the office balance? 72% answered yes. Again, can you remember what was taken from that? That 72% of, admittedly, a relatively small sample of 88, felt confident in preparing the office balance.
I would think, I can't remember exactly, but I think that we thought we were probably on the right track. You know, what we were providing was sufficient, or for it was a good response, I think, really.
Again, why would that be taken as a good measure of success?
Because I suppose because it wasn't the other way around, that it wasn't 22% said they were, they'd had sufficient training.
And then question 6, please. In which area of the post office operation do you feel least confident, and why? It seems that people didn't include a why answer.
No.
17% felt least confident in balancing. And then question 8 at the foot of the page. Are there any areas where you feel you need more training or support? 18% felt they needed more training in balancing and the trading period. Can you help us as to whether anything was taken from this customer feedback, that there was a significant minority of individuals who felt that the training they'd received on balancing was inadequate and they wished for more of it?
No. I think if further down the pages it does
It set out your analysis.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
we go to
yeah.
page 5.
and what we did, what our response was to
And
the
just scroll down, please.
feedback.
And just scroll down, please. Thank you. There's your narrative explaining the results. You say, from the above results, the majority of new agents who completed the feedback questionnaire feel they've received sufficient training to enable them to process transactions and prepare the office balance. That, of course, is statistically correct because a majority did, more than 50% did.
Yeah.
But can you remember why the 72% figure was not seen as a concern,
No, I don't.
seen by you as a concern?
No, I don't recall.
Because it's close to a third of individuals not feeling they've received sufficient training to enable them to process transactions and prepare an office balance.
I think no, I don't know.
And at the foot of the page, half of respondents felt they didn't need any further training or support. From those who did feel they needed further training or support, 18% replied that they required further, over the page please, training in the weekly and TP balances. Can you remember what was done as a result of that?
Well, only from what it says here. As part of the new training offer, the agent receives coaching on minimum service standard conversations. Part of the performance, they are assessed on the quality of their conversations. Well, that doesn't relate to that, does it?
No. I can't see anything that relates to the balancing issue that has been
Yeah,
pulled up from
sorry,
the...
no, I don't know then. Sorry.
We've heard some evidence in the inquiry that in the testing stage of Horizon in the late 90s, in the acceptance phase of Horizon, when Horizon was being tested against some contractual provisions to determine whether the post office should agree that the project could proceed further to national rollout. And in the course of national rollout, concerns were expressed by sub-postmasters about the balancing process. And here, a decade on, there is a significant minority of people saying that they have got issues or concerns with the balancing process. It's one of the top concerns of those that express the view. Can you recall whether this was escalated within the post office or not?
No, I can't.
Who would this report have gone to?
This one. My line manager,
Who was
I think, would have been Sue Richardson,
still at April 2011?
possibly. And I don't know where else it would have gone.
Were you aware of the things that I've just mentioned, that concerns had been consistently expressed by sub-postmasters and others in testing, acceptance and rollout over balancing?
No.
So for you, this was just a standalone analysis of 88 responses to a request for feedback?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then turning to the end of your time in the post office, please. Can we look at poll 308 8953? And I think we can see you're a recipient of this email in January 2015 from Simon Drinkwater. You're in second in the distribution list.
Yes.
And so this is a year or so before you take redundancy.
Yes.
And Mr. Drinkwater, if we just scroll down a little bit, we can see he was part of business transformation. Do you remember him?
Yes.
Can you remember what role he performed in business transformation?
No.
He says, "Hi everyone, Natalie Liff, is that field support advisor again,
Yes.
has worked on producing a quick guide to balancing for postmasters who have a loss or gain, see attached. This has been produced because there doesn't seem to be a clear process to follow in the event of a misbalance." Do you know why it was that 15 years after the introduction of Horizon, there wasn't a clear process to follow in the event of a misbalance?
No, I don't.
If we look at the top of the page, please, and look at the distribution list there. Could you talk us through, if you know what role those people were performing at this time? So Sue Richardson,
She was my line manager.
and so her title and role would be,
I can't remember her title at the time.
her role would be,
I think it was projects manager. I can't remember exactly the title. And the role. Oh no, I don't remember. I shouldn't remember.
Okay.
Sorry.
Jackie Newton,
She was training, something to do with training, but I can't remember her full role.
Angela Vandenberger,
Higher up, but I don't know exactly her role, title.
Craig Tuthill,
I know the name, I can't remember his title and role.
and Alaka.
I'm not going to be very helpful here, I'm sorry.
Okay, cutting things short, for the remainder of the people on the to list, is there anyone you recognise and the job that they did?
I recognise my husband's name, Drew McBride, and his role at the time, I can't recall actually exactly the title. He was head of something. I should know that, sorry, Drew. And then there's Natalie Liff, who was the FSA who produced the handout. Chris Goulding,
we know.
yeah,
And Tim
and-
Gordon-Pounder.
he's FSA, similar to Natalie.
Of the people mentioned in that distribution and copy list, did any of them have responsibility for or connections to investigations?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know.
We've seen that the email says that there doesn't seem to be a clear process to follow in the event of a misbalance. And then a series of questions are asked by reference to the document that's attached, a quick guide to balancing. And 4 questions are asked. Can you recall whether you answered them?
No, I don't recall.
You can't recall whether you answered any of these questions or not?
I think I would have done if we were asked to respond, then I would have responded. But I don't recall what I said.
If we go over the page, please. I think this is the document that was described as the quick and easy guide to balancing. Can you recall whether you regarded this as a quick and easy or clear and easy process to follow for a sub-postmaster to reconcile his or her cash and stock on Horizon as at 2015?
It's, from reading it, it looks straightforward enough to me, but I don't have enough Horizon experience to know whether in practical terms that would have been an easy guide to follow.
Thank you. Those are the only questions that I asked Mrs. McBride. There may be some questions from others. Starting, no. And the Hodge-Jones and Allen team, no. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Those are all of the questions that you're to be asked. Thank you.
thank you.
Well, Mrs. McBride, thank you very much for coming to the inquiry and for answering a good deal of questions this morning. I'm grateful to you. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we're not sitting this afternoon or tomorrow, and so
No.
the inquiry reconvenes at 10 a.m. on Thursday.
Fine. All right. Thank you very much. See you then. Bye.
Thank you, sir.